thank you all for joining us this morning on our first roundtable of the summit. My name is David Merrick from Florida State, and I have way too many panelists here to introduce all of them. They do have their name tags up here. If you'd like to wander up and see who's who, that's fine. So this is private sector's role in response to disasters. I think we all understand the private sector has a key role in responding to disasters, especially when we talk about capabilities and new innovative solutions for critical issues for our impacted communities. One of the things that we've been working on is the Virtual Business Emergency Operations Center with Larry. Okay, good. And this is a tool for DEM to gather information from the private sector about how their businesses have been impacted, as well as what their status is post-disaster, and identify some of the needs that the private sector has so that the state can help them get back up and running as quickly as possible, because we all know that we want to get back to normal or a new normal as quickly as we can. So this session is focusing on how the private sector can help work with emergency managers during a disaster response. We've got a bunch of bulleted items up here, and I'm going to throw it out to the panel here in a minute. But again, I want to remind those in the audience sitting in the back and the sides here, please, if you have questions or comments during the session, don't hesitate to throw your hand up or just start yelling. That's fine too. So let's start off with the first point is let's identify and talk about some of the ways that emergency management on this side can help and work with the private sector, particularly when we're talking about streamlining resources that are available and needed post-disaster. And maybe some of our panelists could get us started with some examples of that. Yes, I'm not the only one that has to talk. Yes, sir.
Yes, the mic on?
Is the, yeah, just pull it closer to you if you need to.
Yeah, hello, I'm Bill Kohlbecker, Assistant Vice President of Claims with USAA Insurance Company. And one thing that we've seen through the 04-05 hurricane season and also the 90s with Andrew, Opal, Aaron, and George is the communication between the state and the insurance companies is vital. And what has a strategy that has worked very well is setting up insurance villages where all the insurance companies come to one location, and that's advertised by the state, it's advertised by each insurance company, so that the policy holders that are affected, if they're waiting for their adjuster hasn't arrived yet, or they just want to know what to do next, they can go and meet with a representative of the insurance company at those locations. And I think that's a great strategy going forward. Now with your new Virtual Business Emergency Operations Center, I can see some of the same things will exist. It's a portal, obviously, that insurance companies can put information in as far as contact numbers or status of where their adjusters are, things of that nature. So looking forward to seeing how that plays out in the future virtually versus being in person all the time. A lot of business can be transacted on insurance claims virtually, especially with a lot of ways of inspecting houses these days through satellite technology and things of that nature.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sally Bishop with Pinellas County Emergency Management. I'd say from an emergency management perspective on resources, one of the things that we've seen develop over the years is to go on Bill's point is the state's involvement with the businesses. And from a county's standpoint, that's a big help if we're immediately impacted. The more that the state is able to do with nationwide industry and even with statewide industry in coordinating with them, helping them to know what the status is in the region, what reentry issues are going on, and then for them to be able to communicate back to us that these companies are interested, they're coming to help with some of those reentry issues. Just that type of coordination and communication is extremely helpful to the county at the local level when we're kind of up to our eyeballs with other things in the immediate aftermath. But we also are vested in them coming and want them to be there. So that intermediary role that the state can play has been developing, and I think is only going to be a good thing as it continues to develop.
Great, thank you. Yes, sir.
I am Mitch Scandalakis with Waffle House. I'm a vice president for internal investigations, and I also handle all of Waffle House's entry into disasters after the fact. One of the things that I appreciate from what Florida has done, from the governor on down to Brian to the people that surround these good business-minded folks, is that they're building a culture of wanting to get businesses back up and running as quickly as possible, because that is really what Waffle House, it's embedded in our culture that you show up. After a disaster, you will find the chairman of the board of directors, the CEO, and all the officers descend in a particular region and actually working in a Waffle House to make sure that it is up and running, that the community is being fed, the first responders are being fed, and our hourly associates, who are minimum wage folks, they can't wait for business to reopen. They need to work because they are having a hard time making ends meet as it is, and they enjoy getting all those big tips from those customers who just can't wait to get a hot meal. So our culture is show up. Our culture is to be there when it's needed. And what the state of Florida is doing, I think the best thing that can happen from the state level is for that to trickle down to the local governments. Because if we can't access, because a local county or a sheriff or a police department doesn't want us in there for whatever reason, it doesn't help anybody. And it's okay for you guys at your level to say, hey, we're all for business, but if it doesn't really trickle down to that local level, where we need to have access to a particular county to get to an affected area, we're shut out. And a lot of times Waffle House will just show up regardless. We'll just show up and ask, forgiveness later rather than ask permission, because it's in our DNA. I mean, we've had in a local parish in Louisiana, we had a sheriff show up with a bunch of deputies with AR-15s and forcibly shut us down because they had a curfew in effect. They didn't need the curfew, but it was just their way of dealing with the incident. And that's the kind of stuff that we deal with on a daily basis. But we were very appreciative of the effort you guys are making. I've been all over the country to every state Waffle House does business in, and Florida literally is leading the way towards making sure the private sector is up and running very quickly.
Thank you. Any other, Brian?
Hey, David, I'll go back to the original question of what is the role of the private sector in response to disasters. And the answer legally is nothing. I mean, they're not tasked. Macy's and Waffle House and Publix aren't tasked with opening up after a disaster. They can shut down for as long as they desire. It's their business. They can do whatever they choose. However, there's a multitude of benefits that can come from being active in that situation. And that's one of the things we want to help spread. And then the fact that they are doing it helps spread amongst the industry as well. I mean, you generate a tremendous amount of, not only you get customers coming to you because they're looking for a hot meal or fresh food or replacement clothes, but you generate goodwill that's going to extend well beyond that disaster. They're going to remember that Waffle House was open. And that the IHOP next door perhaps wasn't. And the next time it's a blue sky and they're hungry, they're going to go eat at Waffle House. Same thing for the other folks here. So there's a great deal that it generates there. It generates goodwill for the company as a whole as they continue to look for expansion opportunities. I know that was when I was at Walmart. They trotted me around the country all the time because as hard as it was to get to Walmart in some markets, I could go and tell the good side of the business, and that helped grease the skids for a lot of expansion. There's a tremendous amount of marketing that you can tie into this thing. We've all seen the Home Depot commercial where you see the semi-truck have a blinker on one way and then switch it and head towards the storm. People appreciate their participation in that, and frankly, the amount of time and effort and money that you may spend dealing with that disaster could be far less than the cost. That the media and the goodwill you generate will be far cheaper than it would be just running traditional advertising. And then finally, the impact of putting your employees back to work, helping them return to normalcy, keeping a paycheck going in that community is far, far better than government handouts in that kind of situation. People don't want government handouts, they want to work. And so the better we're able to help facilitate that as a government, the more we want to do that. And so there's, again, legally, do whatever you choose, but competitively, it makes sense to be in this market.
Those are all great points, and that really kind of is the point of us being here for these 2 days. You know, the Waffle Houses and AT&Ts and Walmarts and Targets, they don't have that obligation, but it is to their best interest and their employees' best interest and the community's best interest that they be prepared and try to get things back to normal as quickly as possible. Any of our private sector folks have any stories they want to share kind of along those lines? Good or bad? Yes, sir.
Good morning. Louis Jones of Publix. Actually had the opportunity to work in Nashville, Tennessee when we had the floods up there a few years ago, and you know, it's definitely helpful to the community when you can get your store back open, even if you're running on limited power. But you know, we had an opportunity where you know, a few stores were pretty much isolated. That was the only thing in the community open, and so not only getting your associates back to work, being able to feed people, putting power strips out on the end of every aisle, letting people charge their mobile devices. That became the hub of the community. Even people just walking in wanting a hot cup of coffee because that wasn't available anywhere else. So think about that on a larger scale. If something impacts Florida, a storm or something, if you're driving down the road and the Publixes are boarded up, that's not good. It's not good for our associates. It's not good for our communities. So, you know, we have it in our culture as well. Take care of our associates, be a part involved as responsible citizens in our communities, and I think that's one way we do that. So our investment to make sure we can get our stores back open is to help make that community stronger. So that's the interest after an event, is getting back in and being able to get life back to normal. So when you are driving down the street, got that comfort, hey, this business is open, I can get milk, I can get diapers, I can get my prescription filled. That takes a lot of burden off the state, but I think at the end of the day, it puts a lot of comfort back into people's minds that, hey, we're going to make it through this.
Great. So how do we do that? How does Publix try to get their stores back open as quickly as possible? What systems do you use? What does Waffle House use? Any of the private sector partners? How do you accomplish that mission to try to get things back to normal for your associates and for your communities?
Well, one of the things the Waffle House does is we plan a year out in advance. We have a storm playbook, a disaster playbook, and we will get all of the stakeholders together from the various departments, and we will meet on a regular basis to put together the playbook. And as we reach the hurricane season, we will start having more frequent meetings to make sure that we've got the vendor ready for the generators, to make sure that our vendors that provide our food, U.S. Foods and others, are going to be available. And we stress very seriously to all of our vendors, if we need you and you're not there, we're getting other vendors. And we've had to have some tough conversations with some of our larger vendors. And then when an event is coming, and we can pretty much know where it's coming because we have some sophisticated software that we've purchased to be able to track this stuff, just like the National Weather Service, we will begin to activate our own emergency management center. And then as the storm continues to progress, we will get an idea of where we're going to bring our caravan. We have a communications van. We actually have a new food service truck that will assist our units in the distribution of food. And then once the thing hits, we are actually rolling towards that area, and we will stage outside of it so that the very next day we have all of our people that basically descend into that community to make sure those restaurants are up and running. Our boots on the ground are the senior operators in the area who are there to observe where are the streets that are washed out, where are the streets that have the telephone poles or trees down that we can't access. How can we get to this unit? They are our first line of communication. So we really know before the state would even tell us where we can have access to our restaurants. So when we get in our restaurants, we then pick those that don't have power, and we bring in those generators. And at that point, our communication with the state is important because we like to know at that point, where's power coming up first? You know, what grid is going to be coming up so that we can then move those assets that we have to other Waffle Houses that don't have power. All of our associates know to be there in advance because they all have key fobs that we've given them 6 months to a year in advance with information on it. They have meetings at the units themselves to get ready for this thing. Then we will fly senior restaurant operators from all over the country to the area to operate out of those restaurants. I remember in North Carolina one year I was in a dish pit washing dishes because they won't let me cook even though I'm Greek. It's kind of a misconnect there. My boss, who's the 4th largest stockholder in Waffle House, was calling out orders. The chairman of the board was in another restaurant calling out orders. Our president and CEO was bussing tables. And that's the kind of culture to make a successful company react to the community and put that community back up and running as quickly as possible. It's the culture of showing up.
So, Mitch, Kathy Fulton, American Logistics Aid Network, I know we just met this morning. I want to challenge you a little bit. You talk a lot about what your individual company does, and you also mentioned earlier, sometimes we go into places even when government doesn't want us there. So since we're here this couple of days to solve the challenge of how do we work together better, where's that intersection? You have government activities, you have private company activities. Where's that intersection? What's the foundation for building a better partnership or teamwork, as Administrator Fugate
That's a good
refers to it?
question. And one of my jobs, Waffle Houses, I won't say they're kind of cheap, but they make you wear a bunch of different hats. I'm the Director of Internal Investigations. I'm also I handle food safety advocacy for the company, and then I handle all of the emergency management stuff when it deals with access. One of the things that I've been tasked to do is to travel all over the country and meet all of the different states' emergency management heads and try to start opening that dialogue. In Florida, in the coastal states, I even try to drill down to the individual counties. For example, I've met with Escambia and Santa Rosa, and those two counties are just lockstep with the state. If you don't know that, Ryan, I'm sure you do, but everybody in those areas wants the communities back up and running. Pinellas, for example, everybody has the same mindset. But we do come across a lot of states, and it just amazes me that they have no clue because their mindset and their culture is, we're the government, we're in charge when these things hit, you guys wait till we tell you it's safe to come in, and that's it. And that's why we've just taken the attitude as a company, we know what we're doing. We go into these areas whether we have permission or not. We feed the National Guard because once we're there and they show up and want 250 meals, we're the only thing in town because they'd rather eat hot food than MREs. So it really starts at a ground level where we're making the effort to go out and meet with these states to try to, actually really to tell them what you guys are doing here. And we use Florida as a model.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from that is the foundation is relationships.
Yes.
Okay.
Networking.
So it all starts with building those connections between people at the right level of organizations. It comes from sharing processes and best practices and understanding how those things, how business can help government and how government can help business, which I think is the sub-question to this particular conversation right now. We like to talk a lot about virtual BEOC and, no discredit to that program, but if we layer technology on top of poor process, then we're not necessarily moving ourselves forward. So I think, looking at those base processes, looking at what it is that makes us successful, and every time, every response, the reason we're successful, all of the success stories I hear about across the country come about because of a personal connection. They come about because of a relationship. They come about because someone has sat down and had coffee or an adult beverage with someone else that they could work with.
I think I've got a comment down here.
Yes, my name is Brenda Amy. I'm the manager of business disaster recovery for Hillsborough County. And we're doing exactly that right now. I am part of Economic Development Department, but I am embedded with the EOC to learn as much as we can, and we're trying to look for all the best practices out there in the country. We're developing a reentry plan for Hillsborough County so that we can work with all the critical businesses to make sure we can get them back in at the appropriate time. And looking for any relationship. So if you're a business and you're in Hillsborough County, please make sure I get your business card. And we are also going to have a hotline number in our ESF 18.
Fantastic.
I feel obligated to say something.
Okay, well, by all means.
You knew it wouldn't be long. Hi, everybody. Chauncia from the City of Tampa, Office of Emergency Management. And I love what you were saying, Kathy, about relationship building. In Tampa, our philosophy for emergency management and the EOC really is inclusivity. We try to be as inclusive as possible. One of the things that we do, and we've been working on the private sector business development angle, ESF 18, for about 6 years now. One of the things we do is we try to involve our private sector partners in our training activities. For example, we just had Waffle House come in and talk and take some ICS training. They provided breakfast. Thank you for that. And that was fantastic. But you know, there are so many ways that we can involve our private sector partners in what we're doing every day in emergency management, even as far as our community, you know, different community events we have. Right now, we have the largest hurricane expo in the state of Florida, in Tampa. We want Waffle House to come out with a food truck for free. If at all possible. We're not begging, but
Looks like we're doing it for free.
yes. So, you know, we just enjoy having our private sector partners plan with us, participate in different activities. We have Walgreens, Waffle House, Home Depot, Publix. We try to get them all into the EOC because the EOC belongs to the community. It's not just for the city of Tampa. It's not just for our government. It's for everybody. So we want you to know our plan as well as we do, and we want to know your plans. So just as you said, let us know if you have any needs or any desires to partner up with the City of Tampa. We have the Gasparilla Parade coming up. That's a time when we invite all of our private sector partners to come to our EOC to see it activated. Gasparilla is the second largest parade in the country. So we provide passes, we provide helicopter transport so you can see how it's done and see how your city is operating for you. So that's just one of the things we do with our private sector partners to build that relationship.
Chauncia is right, and I was remiss in not mentioning Tampa. We were welcomed as a private sector partner with open arms by Chauncia in the city of Tampa. I mean, it was the easiest networking in my career to be able to walk in and meet her, and basically she extended immediately the opportunity for me to get trained in their EMS center as a planner. And hell yeah, I'm gonna buy you breakfast every time.
Good, because we're hungry.
Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Andrew Boyce. I'm with the Salvation Army. Fairly new to the Salvation Army. I've only been in there for 3 months. I'm the state logistician. But just kind of piggybacking on some of the comments, what can happen too is that in my previous life I had worked for FEMA, and I've seen the benefit of Publix being open right after a storm. I've seen the benefit of Waffle House being open after the storm, where the thing is that as a first responder, you go in and that's what you want to see. You want to be able to get your goods. You want to be able to have a hot meal, something that you're familiar with. From the Salvation Army standpoint, what we can do is we can help each other by, I'll say, soliciting donations from our private sector partners, which we need to do a better job of doing, because right now at my facility we have a 50,000 square foot warehouse that we need to fill. And by doing that, we can help people in the community, we can help citizens, we can help first responders to basically have that hot meal through our food, through our mobile feeding systems, our canteens that feed the first responders, feed people in the community. And myself, we need to do a better job of partnering with Publix, with Waffle House, with every private sector business that we can, to have that warehouse filled so that we can go forward and basically help the community recover faster. And it takes a burden off everybody because, again, friends, family, they might be impacted there.
Yeah, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that, private sector doesn't just mean businesses. It doesn't just mean retail, okay? Private sector encompasses everyone from our, nonprofit groups to retail to you name it. If you're not a government entity, you're private sector, individual citizens. And so, we all need to keep in mind that those relationships need to be maintained. Also, I don't know where Pete McNally is, but, Polk County, which is my county, thank you, Pete, does a fabulous job. The first Friday of every month, they have an emergency preparedness advisory council meeting. It's nonprofits, it's businesses, it's emergency management. They feed people breakfast. It's not Waffle House breakfast, but it does have bacon, so Billy Abernathy can get his bacon. It's a Polk County joke. But it's a great way to maintain those active relationships. It's not, seeing somebody once a year and, having their business card in your Rolodex or their name on your phone. It's getting to that relationship level rather than just that, hey, nice to meet you kind of level.
Yes, ma'am.
Mickey Valenti with Valenti Advisors. This relates to recovery, not just response, but it all starts in response. I think what emergency management is doing here, bringing together not just the private sector partners, but the other agencies, those who touch business on a daily basis, because what I see around the country is that part is usually missing. It's emergency management and partners, and none of the other agencies engaged. And so by doing that, I think the education of businesses and what resources are out there, who they need to be working with, including emergency management, but in addition to emergency management, especially when it comes to the support for their employees, should something occur that most of them are not, especially small businesses, are not aware of, usually. On the other side of it, too, understanding not, because we tend to talk in terms of large businesses, large employers, and small, instead of looking at the economic structure of the community and dependent businesses and primary businesses, because what you often see happen with good intentions is assistance to small businesses to get their doors open without necessarily the right consideration of who are they dependent on to operate. If their clients are gone because that plan is closed down or whatever for a period of time, are you really doing them a favor by reopening their doors immediately? So the understanding that economic structure as best you can to know how to prioritize and where to give assistance first. And the triggers that large businesses have, I've heard many people say they can take care of themselves, they have insurance, they have these resources. It's true, they do. However, they have to make decisions. And if you don't understand what their triggers are and how long their employees will be paid and how long that insurance lasts, and those pieces, you don't really understand how you're going to help that community recover.
Thanks, Mickey. Yep.
Hi, my name is Duke Edwards. I'm with ServPro. I want to kind of expand a little bit on what Ms. Fulton said down there on the communication, the relationship part of it. I'm a guy that comes in after a disaster. We're the guys that actually do the work, cleaning it up, drying it down, sanitizing it, sometimes rebuilding it, putting the businesses back in order. The communication between the government sector and the public sector and all the different laws and rules you got to navigate is key. Going down to the water that you extract. Is it contaminated? What do you dispose of it? How do you dispose of it? The sand that's on the beach or in the property that came off the beach, where do we do with it? Do we put it on the edge, and who's going to dispose of that? Who's responsible for that? So that communication factor is huge. Getting into the area that had the loss is also big. We actually we have a plan in place with ServPro where we have 1,700 something franchises across the country. Almost every one of those franchises dedicated at least one crew when a disaster happens to go to the area, usually right beforehand, stage outside the area so that we can service our customers, which are several of the insurance companies like State Farm and et cetera, as well as the commercial end of it that we have contracts in place with. So what we do in advance is we'll actually talk with the local communities beforehand, the counties, and let them know that we have certain contracts in place and that we've been called, and let them know. So that when we get there and they've got the area blocked off, a lot of times either the National Guard or the state troopers or whoever the person is that's in control of the security for the area will go ahead and pass us through because they've already got our name on the list. We've pre-planned that, we've advanced in beforehand and told them who we are. We got communication information and contact information. So, you know, like Ms. Fulton said, that communication part of it is vitally important to know and navigate and to get you back in business as quick as you can, and also the infrastructure part of it. I mean, we do a lot of stuff with the hospitals, the schools, the power plants, and et cetera, so that you can, you know, get that infrastructure up and running.
Yeah, and Chauncey talked about, you know, from government inviting private sector into your EOCs, but, you know, I challenge every business here that you need to have your emergency manager come and tour your facilities. Because, you know, I've seen it firsthand. My background is in third-party warehousing logistics, and the amount of products that can be used to serve a community within the 1.5 million square feet that are sitting on that campus are vast, but if Pete doesn't know they're there, he's not going to give any priority to opening the roads around Saddle Creek. So that's important for businesses, even if it's, you know, Macy's that just has clothing, and we talked about this. You know, you got to get your, and Brian alluded to this, you got to get your employees paid. You got to, you know, make money so you can pay taxes. It's an economic ecosystem that has to stay balanced. I'm sorry, I cut somebody off down there.
I'm Bill Eastep. I'm Nassau County Emergency Management Director, and I'm the new guy on the block. I've actually only been there for about 9 months. But I actually engaged private sector very early on. We only really have a handful of private sector employers, the rest being governmental based. And in that situation, the constant question was, how do we get information out of the EOC? How do we know when to evacuate? How do we know when we can return? Because most of those private sector employers are actually located on our barrier island. So it's a very important question for them. So in actuality, the route that we've chosen to take is to include them in the EOC. We're actually training them in how to operate in the EOC, be part of our staffing in the EOC, and letting them be part of the solution to answering their questions. Likewise, they are also a large provider of resources in our recovery efforts. And so we've actually been engaging them on how to protect those resources, how to make them available, and how we will actually utilize them in a post-disaster recovery. So I think it's our attempt to actually bridge that communication gap that we continue to hear here. And that's actually making them an active part of our disaster recovery.
I think we're definitely seeing a theme here, right? Everyone is talking about the need for information flow, information sharing, for better understanding between what's happening in the EOC and what's happening in the private sector. So my question right now to the panelists is, what information do you need as government, okay, that you can get from the private sector? And on the private side, what information do you need from government? And how is that happening? How is that information being exchanged right now? We've got great examples of putting private sector inside the EOC. Are there other examples? Brian?
Dave, I'm going to back up, and this is not response information. This is a preparedness and marketing information. I'm going to go back to what Mitch was talking about. You obviously are losing money in a disaster. If you're flying in people and your CEO is washing dishes and you sell eggs and bread for $2.99, you're not making any money at all, and you've made a conscious decision to do that. Same with public, same with lots of you. You've made it a conscious decision that the culture of your company is you're going to open up regardless of how much money you're going to lose, and I'd hate to be your CFO. But so my question is that you see that in companies who have been through disasters before. They've gone through it and they recognize what they need to do in those situations. How do we reach companies who have not yet been through that situation? It's been 9+ years in Florida since the last hurricane. There's been lots of companies that have formed in the state. They've been operating under this blissful perhaps unawareness or ignorance of what that storm could do to them. How do we get to them and help them develop a culture similar to you have in advance of the next situation? So we don't have to wait for them to go through the fire before they figure out what they do. How do we get into their leadership and help them understand this is something you should do, and it's, it was beneficial for you to do that. Even if you run the numbers and it doesn't make any sense, ultimately it's something you probably want to be engaged with. So how do we, for our partners here, how do we market? And we do lots of marketing and outreach to the business sector. I want to make sure that we're doing it right. How do we get that message out to them in a way that resonates appropriately?
I think you do it through events like this. I mean, I've never been to an event like this where I've seen this many private sector folks attend. It's usually a bunch of local, EMS agencies attending, and I mean, this is great. I like seeing Disney here and USAA and all these other companies that I've never hooked up with or networked with. This is the way to do it. I mean, people need to understand that this affects everyone. And it's really, again, it gets back to culture, because the culture is that as the private sector, we need to wait until we're told when we can come back. And that needs to be changed. And that really starts from the top down, from you guys, from your leadership, and from the governor, to get that word out and to get us together as the private sector so that we can work hand in hand, because government can't get things up and running without us. It's impossible.
Yes, ma'am.
Susie Reineman from HSN. So Home Shopping Network has our corporate headquarters here in St. Petersburg. And I wanted to talk a little bit to what Brian was just saying, because it really resonated with me. When the private industry comes to these events, generally it's the people within the private industry that are responsible for emergency management, business continuity. We are the people that are selling our programs to our executives. So it really resonated what Brian was saying to me. You don't have to sell it to me. I get it. Who we have to sell it to is the executives, the directors within our company, to make sure they understand the value add. So I really feel like it's important that we need to go to them at the conferences that they're at, because they're not going to probably be coming to these conferences as much. So to what Brian was saying, if we can get something where we're actually presenting our emergency management principles or challenges within the environment that they're used to going to. So
That's a great point.
Can I brag and give a quick example of how we're doing that within the supply chain community? And this is full-on brag, so I'm not trying to sell you guys anything. But we recognize that working at the association level, so the professional and industry associations to which supply chain and logistics companies belong, are going to attract those C-suite attendees. And we make a very conscious decision to go to 15 or 20 of those conferences every year to talk to them about how disruptions are affecting them. There's a whole focus on risk. I guarantee you the CEOs are worried about risk. CFOs are worried about risk mitigation. So it's learning exactly what you said. It's learning how to speak their language and getting in front of them. But I'd say that, starting at that association level, starting at those conferences and figuring out how to get on those agendas is important.
From the, hi, Chauncey again, from the local level, something that we've done in Tampa that I think has been very beneficial is when we go through our continuity of operations planning as a government, we also begin the process of business recovery for the community. So we have the police department go out and distribute business recovery pamphlets to the mom and pop businesses. We try to be as conscious as possible that everyone in the community is a part of the community. So it's not just the big businesses, the large corporations that need attention and need the education on business recovery. It's also the mom and pops. And unfortunately, they aren't often at these conferences because they just don't have the staff or the money to attend things like this. So that's just something that we do as a force multiplier. And we've been able to partner with Wendell from the state to produce pamphlets for these businesses. And it's been very successful. We hope we could, partner with the county at some point to do this. That's just one thing that we're trying to do.
Thank you. I think we had a couple in the audience, so we'll go in the back there.
Linda Rankin with the Tampa Downtown Partnership. We work very closely with Chauncey and Hillsborough County. And what we do is manage the Downtown Improvement District. And we also manage the Downtown Security Network. And part of that is working very closely with Chauncey is we have a reentry program. And if we have a disaster or an evacuation downtown, we maintain that database. We get that database to Hillsborough County and to the city of Tampa, and everybody's pre-approved through that list, and they know who the engineers and the property managers are who need to come back in immediately afterward to evaluate their properties. We also represent all the companies in downtown Tampa, so we don't have, we're representing all the private sector. We're not just representing a chain restaurant or a supermarket, but we have all the mom and pop businesses, over 150 restaurants that we're representing, trying to get all of them back on board. So what I would recommend is most cities have a business improvement district that a partnership manages. You might want to get on board with your downtown organizations, your downtown partnership organizations to get that in place, because it's a great way for them to disseminate information. We get a lot of alerts on all kinds of stuff all year long, not just once a year. And Hillsborough County, EOC, and City of Tampa, they do a hurricane seminar for us every year with all of our property managers, and we're in constant contact with all of them. So it's a good way to not just focus on one company or one business, but it pulls everybody in. And they're a great voice for us because we're able to disseminate that information immediately, whether it's a bank robbery or an evacuation or a plane hitting our building in downtown Tampa or whatever it is. We've had those situations, and they've been a great partner for us.
Great, thank you. I think we had another audience comment right here. On the right. Yeah.
Hi, Judy Wolf with Adjusters International. Just wanting to go back to the conversation about how do we sell the concept to the C-suite, and I thought that was a great question to be asking, because ultimately that's who makes the decision to really go out and take action. And my thought, just a suggestion, Brian, to continue answering your question, was if you're going out to meet them where they are, if you're going to be targeting those industry associations, conferences, et cetera, where they are gathering, think about who is presenting the message to them. Who are the C-suite executives going to be listening to? So this is an opportunity to engage the executives at Waffle House or Publix or whoever else you already have as champions within those organizations. Can they go out and sell to their peers? What were the benefits? Why are they doing it? How can that be replicated in various industry sectors? So just a suggestion there.
Great. Yes, sir.
Let me comment briefly about the risk issue. My name is Chris Summerell. I'm the Global Business Continuity Director for UPS. Based on the HSN question, I'll speak from experience that if you want to resonate with your C-suite, you need to bring it to your risk council. Most audit committees or boards have committees that assess risk, and emergency response, business continuity is downstreams quite a bit, but from the risk assessment. So if you can deal with the C-suite at the risk level, which they're charged to manage, respond, you'll get the traction that you need. So that's really what UPS has done, and our board has embraced what we need to do, and we respond effectively from that. So,
great. I've got one up front here.
Good morning, everyone. I need the mic. Steve White with Agility Recovery. I've done emergency communication with amateur radio since '72 at Tropical Storm Agnes, so I've been the first responder type. One of the things I wanted to recommend to the public sector when you're doing the training for your local businesses and providing opportunities, think a little bit outside the box. National companies, Service Pro, of course, has a franchise system. Agility Recovery partners with the Small Business Administration to do webinars on disaster planning, disaster communications, a resource you could pass on. But their niche is the short term. So they'll come in and provide the portable office, generators, fuel, power, communications, internet, servers, in the 24, 48 hours after the disaster until Service Pro and the local contractors can get the building back up and running. It's a national company, 25 years. We want to work with local government when you have your local mom and pops come in for a seminar or you're having a program. So it's a great educational opportunity to know there are other resources that are not necessarily local, but can respond to the local disaster very, very promptly.
Thank you. Okay. We'll go to the back here, and I'll come right back to you in a second.
Hello, John Ward, Clay County Emergency Management. Great conversations that we're having here in our area, Northeast Florida. My Chamber of Commerce, SF-18, and they are at the table with us, having those conversations with us. The only thing that I heard that's concerning out of the group here, and maybe I misunderstood it, is I want to warn businesses, please don't circumvent the processes that are in place. If we're stating that you can't access a respective area, communicate through that ESF-18, but do not circumvent the process. It's the only thing I think that's concerning out of this that we've taught is those processes are in place for a respective reason, and those policy groups, which in my case is ESF-18, they're in there making those decisions. So if we have folks that are going outside that process, I believe we'd have the same thing happen that the gentleman said was coming in to try to shut them down. So.
And we've got one right up here.
He's got the mic. Let him go. Oh, coming my way. Thank you, sir. My name is Dan Krantz, and this isn't working. I'm pretty loud, though. Anybody that knows me? Okay, here we go. My name is Dan Krantz. I'm the CEO of Real Time Technology Group, and I'm going to bypass this. I want to pick up on a couple of things that are said here in different places and try to put them all together. And that is, where is the intersection of public-private? What assets does the private sector have that are valuable in that response and recovery? Whether that's a physical asset or people and people to assess damage, or people that are trained to help in response, like ICS, what I heard about Tampa is fantastic. I think the intersection, to answer the intersection question, is all about the organizations and their resources, whether that be physical or human resources, and how we have insight into who that community is ahead of time in a holistic manner, not in one city or in one county, but throughout a region, throughout the state. Because those resources obviously move and are shared among the various counties depending on where that disaster occurs. So what we find and we help facilitate is that information flow between public and private and the understanding of certifiable assets that aren't just names on lists, because names on lists and placards are easily replicated and checkpoints have difficulty determining what's real and what's not real. It really comes down to sharing of information, being prepared to share that information, having a tool that enables you to share that information, and it's very much the business EOC, but extending that to not just organizations and what assets they have, but who the essential personnel are and how are they skilled or trained as a CERT responder or in ICS. And that's where I think the real progress can be made.
Great, thank you. Okay. Chuck, we'll come to you in just a second.
I don't know if you can hear me here. Marcus Sorensen, Wise Company. There we go. You know, one thing that I think we just, Wise Company, we are a manufacturer of emergency food, has a 25-year shelf life, and where we come into play a lot is in the actual response, or not in the response so much as in the preparation in advance of an event. And I think I come at this as a little different perspective in that regard, just because that's where we do most of our work. And frankly, I think that's one of the areas where we can engage the private sector in a lot more effective way than necessarily in the response portion of an event, because it does get really complicated at that point when you're trying to involve all these different entities. But there is a lot that the private sector can do in the preparation up to an event, including, you know, whether that be things that our company provides, or there's all sorts of amazing technologies and opportunities that the private sector has if we can engage them and look for ways to involve them in the preparation One of the events that the state of Florida does, it's really, I think, very interesting, is the Kids Get a Plan program that's trying to do that, trying to educate the public, and that includes small businesses in that, and trying to get people more aware of how their business and their own families can be ready to respond to a disaster and not be not necessarily be reliant on the government or the city or the county or the state to provide that response for them. So,
Great, thanks very much. Chuck?
Chuck Hagan with the Division of Emergency Management. I'm the State Logistics Chief. Let me kind of build on a couple of comments that have been made. And one of our responsibilities in emergency management is we have a 72-hour window to search, secure, and stabilize an event. That's critical. If we can't do that, then we see what has happened in other events where people weren't showing up or there was complaints. So in Florida, we've been working since 2001, opening the doors, having conversations with key business leaders, talking to the CEOs and CFOs of various corporations. But it really didn't come to light until the storms of 2004, 2005, was how important this really is to have a collaborative effort. Because in Florida, we want to make sure that resources are available to our communities. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's free. So it's counterproductive for us as government to be opening a distribution point in the parking lot of an open retailer who's already open for business. So it's what we've been doing, what I've been doing in the logistics section, is to invite the corporate EOCs to come in on our logistics conference calls twice a day to give us updates as to what their store statuses are, because what we need to focus on as government is the outlying areas, the underserved areas, where you have established your retail operations and you're back and open for business. Okay, so you don't have 47 flavors of cornflakes, but you're open and you have resources out there. And we've been working with a lot of corporations where they said, okay, after a hurricane, we're going to order extra water. We're going to order extra non-perishable types of foods to have available. Even in the big box stores, working with Lowe's and Home Depot, they don't normally sell bottled water, but they're going to bring that in because people are going there for other items. It's these relationships and conversations that we've been having. But what's really important to us at the State Emergency Operations Center, and especially for me on the initial phase for the response, because it's my job to make sure that we are reaching the community. We're out there appropriately working with our county emergency management offices to have what we call points of distribution, or pods. And then essentially the first 24 hours, it's just water. That's the critical point. But it's just the ability to have water being distributed to the community is peacekeeping. It brings a sense of calm. If the community sees that the community is coming back on its feet, that the retailers are reopening, that there are some resources available, then that's going to bring some peace, and it has a psychological effect on the community. So it's important to us to understand where you have reestablished operations, so we're not in your backyard. We're not 2 blocks down from your distribution points. And that we are reaching the appropriate communities. And then also, when it comes to other items in the past, distributing ice, distributing meals. Well, if you're open and you're selling ice and you've got food available, then we don't need to be handing out MREs and we don't need to be handing out ice to the communities. But there may be some outlying rural areas, migrant worker camps, Indian reservations, places where you don't have retail establishments, that we do need to be doing those things. So I guess to bring to summation is, and then somebody else brought up the point that it's not just retailers. We've been trying to work very closely with associations. I've been with the division 15 years, but my background is in the hospitality industry. I used to be an executive chef working in the food service industry. So I have a very strong business background working in that as a corporate vice president. But so I see your side of it, and I see our side of it, and leveraging those types of relationships. But it's also the associations that we like to bring in: the Florida Retail Federation, the Florida Lodging and Hotel Association, the Florida Realty Boards, that all can contribute to this information flow. And that's really what I'm getting back at, is the information flow at the Emergency Operations Center, whether we utilize a business EOC as a conduit for that, but feeding that back so you have awareness of where we're at, we have awareness of where you're open, and that we're not duplicating efforts. And then this also helps in supply chain management, because if I'm going out ordering 1,000 trucks of bottled water every single day, that's impacting your ability to purchase bottled water because we're all buying from the same vendor, essentially. And the same thing is true in other areas.
Thanks, Chuck. I think that kind of cut right across the entire concept here. How do we exchange that information? How does CERT know what businesses are open and what businesses are closed and what their status is, and vice versa? And the VBEOC is one way that we can do that, but I think there's probably other mechanisms that are in play right now, and I think a lot of it comes down to that relationships. We've got chambers of commerce, we've got associations, we've got businesses working in local and county EOCs. That's great. Are there other examples out there of how this information is getting exchanged right now?
Paul Phipps with Visit Florida, and we have a close relationship with emergency management. We come at it from two different sides. Certainly, we have 15,000 partners, and the vast majority are small business. And on our visitflorida.org side, it really becomes the information flow for them to connect with emergency management on what is going on and getting updates. But on any given day, we have 1 million visitors in this state. And so they look to us for, we have an emergency accommodation module, so we know where there's available rooms around the state. The other thing that happens for tourism in this state is a part of the state can be hit with a disaster, but the rest of the state is open for business and people don't realize it. So we have to monitor just what we communicate, when we communicate it, and more importantly, for parts of the state that are open, to get that communication out to people and people that are traveling. We have 5 welcome centers. They become information centers for this. So we work closely with both our private sector side, but then with the public, because they, at the end of the day, they look to Visit Florida, for information. And can I still come on this vacation I've planned for, 2 or 3 months? At the same time, for those people, if it's an evacuation situation, where is their accommodations and how can we get them moved as quickly as possible? So we hold webinars for our small business partners just on how they can get information, but also post. We will have a weather alert right on our homepage of visitflorida.com. With it, we have live feeds from all over the state we take in. And so there's things constantly being updated with that to try to provide as much to the public as we can, but also to the private sector.
Building on that theme, I think it's key what Paul said is those unaffected businesses and industries. For South Carolina, we're a small state, so a hurricane that would come through would probably damage a good portion of the state. However, when we talk about those unaffected businesses, if we look at mutual aid compacts that exist for a whole range of things in the emergency response field, do they exist in our private sector so that we can leverage that capacity and capability as well? I shared this with our chamber. If we lost the Port of Charleston, that's critical. Our sea lines of communication, air lines of communication, and ground locks are all critical for the businesses that are in South Carolina, especially our international businesses. So having that shared capacity in mutual aid is beneficial for us to know that if we did have something like that took out the port, I could reach into the BMWs, the Continentals, the Hare, the Hondas, pull additional capacity out of there perhaps in terms of people and equipment to reestablish the port that will then continue to keep those lines of communication open for our businesses. So I think it's important that the unaffected component be identified, and then can we tap into some type of mutual aid compact through our ESF 18 or 24 components to reach out and say, how can you help one another, help us collectively?
That's great.
John Scott, Monroe County Emergency Management. You talked about tourism. For the Florida Keys, tourism makes up about 80 to 85% of our total revenue. So we work really very closely with our tourism folks and our Motel and Lodging Association. Our tourism representative's in the EOC. He has a large distribution list that he actually puts out regular updates that he gets straight from us. He's in that decision-making process with us so that we're coordinating with that level of industry. On their website, there's information ahead of time on what our general policies and procedures are when it comes to hurricane season, what motel and hoteliers, their approach to that kind of stuff is. So how they will relocate in the storm, and we talk about where they're going to go and what that process is. So we stay very, very closely integrated with them, and I think as we have this conversation about what happens at a national level and a state level, it's important to understand at a local level, we're also doing that stuff all the time, and we have those day-to-day relationships so that maybe it's not necessary all the time to look for a new process. It's just about how we better identify and incorporate those local processes.
That's a great point. I'm going to circle back around a second to Scott's point about the businesses helping businesses or B2B. Are there any type of examples in the room of how that has worked for y'all in the past?
Is anybody from McDonald's here? Okay, so I don't know if anybody knows a lot about McDonald's sourcing practices, but one of the things that they do is they don't have necessarily real contracts with some of their providers, and instead they set up consortiums of suppliers. Well, McDonald's has had some supply chain issues that have been broadly reported recently, but those supply chain providers, those providers of those products, know that it's within their best interest to work together. So they're doing group planning. They're talking about what are the, they're working with McDonald's corporate to understand, demand. And so some of those things, I think that businesses, we ourselves should be meeting with the folks across town to talk about, hey, if something happens, how can we share resources? How can, just like you talked about, how can we not just help ourselves, because if we're helping our communities, that's what it's really all about. If the guy down the street goes out of business, if the CVS goes across the street goes out of business and the Walgreens is still open, well, that's one thing. But if you take away, and if an entire plant shuts down, has a devastating impact on the local economy, and so that affects all of the businesses in the area.
Oh, we've got a question in the back.
Well, I can talk about it. He's a good principal. Hi, I'm Cynthia Johnson. I'm with Mills County Economic Development. I'm a senior manager of economic development, but I'm also the center director for the Small Business Development Center. So in response to the question about communication and how are we getting the word out, I'll just share with you all that in Pinellas County, our Small Business Development Center is located within economic development. So we have access to not only the smaller business, but we have access to the corporate partners. So during our retention visits with our corporate partners, we share the information about business continuity and get to know who in that corporate entity is the person responsible. And some of the feedback that we got from them is they just want one point of contact. And so I sit in the EOC for economic development. So I'm in the EOC, so they have one number, one contact. They use the Economic Development Agency as that business liaison, and then that way, we don't have like 15 managers trying to respond to, 15 different questions. So I think that if we're talking about communication, you have a national network, and here in the state of Florida, we have the Florida Small Business Development Center network that has been designated by the state as the business assistance provider. We do outreach. We have centers everywhere. We have counselors who are certified business continuity specialists who actually administer the bridge loan and get the information. So I would suggest that a way to better communicate is to coordinate with your business development centers and your economic development agencies.
Thank you.
Just one note on the business-to-business item. Southeast Florida, and I believe AT&T could probably tell us more about it, but a prototype was built by, I believe, Florida International University down in Miami, and it's being used, I believe, by a consortium down in Southeast Florida of businesses. And the association there is by businesses, for businesses, and the application the whole idea was for businesses to be able to utilize to find suppliers
Right.
that they needed. So it's based on businesses putting their own data in. If you're part of the association, then you have access to that information. So those types of tools have been developed. I think FIU is looking for funding to be able to take it statewide. And that's been several years since that was developed. So those types of ideas are out there. It's just a matter of finding the right traction to make it go further.
Great.
Sally, Tom Surrey of Verizon Wireless. What Sally's talking about is the SFDRC. That's the South Florida Disaster Resiliency Coalition, which is really a public-private partnership of the 4 counties of Southeast Florida. And it's run by the private sector, for the private sector, with public sector inclusion. We don't want it to be a government program. It's a private sector program. So that is running. We haven't had a disaster yet to test it out fully, but it's there. And Rick Berman's in the room. I think, Rick, are you around? There you are, Rick. Rick is the executive director of the program. You need more information, talk to Rick. He'll get you more information about that. We're looking for more partners in that area. Let me go back to another thought, though, is, we have built, people in this room, we each know a lot of people in this room here. We have all, personally built a network of trusted resources. If I need something shipped, I'm not calling the risk guy at UPS. Chris Summerall, where are you? You're back there somewhere. Right, Chris is in the room. I'm going to call Chris, okay? If I need water, I'm calling Lewis at Publix, okay? I have built these trusted resources. What we're talking about, we got together last night, had a little talk. We said we need to build a little network for a private-to-private partnership. Is who do I reach out to at Publix directly to get something done? And this starts from other examples. During Sandy, Jim Williams at Walgreens called me up and said, Tom, I got a store in Manhattan I can open up right now, but my phone lines aren't there. Can you help me out? So I called my guys and said, I need this store open for one of our customers. Can we do it? And by that afternoon, we had the phone lines installed, and he was able to open up that Walgreens, okay? But we only got that done because Jim and I are friends, okay? We know each other's cell phone, okay? I'm not going through the bureaucracy and the red tape when it's a private side to private side, okay? So we need to start looking at this stuff and seeing who our trusted resources are, so I can reach out to them directly. If you need something from the wireless side, call me directly, and I will do what I can to help you out. Just another quick point. Anybody in this room who has not looked at the virtual BEOC, take 15 minutes, get the tutorial, get online, and see the value of this tool. It was built by the state. There's no cost to anybody in this room, correct?
That's correct.
Right? How do I know that? I sat in the EOC during the hurricane exercise this year for 2 days watching these guys tweak and twirl that thing around a little bit to make it work. Shame on us if we don't utilize that as a resource for getting ourselves back into business, for helping the communities, for helping our employees. Because if we can help ourselves get back into business, that's good for the state. It's good for the county. It's good for the local payroll. It's good for our employees. So, we're here for a reason. You're taking 2 days out of your schedule to be here for a reason. You know something? Take a day and go do the hurricane exercise next year. Go out and do your county exercise. Right? I came to Tampa back on August 5th. I gave a whole talk to 30 different agencies in Tampa. That was great for Verizon. You know something? I hope it was great for them to see that we want to be a partner there. Okay? We do this all across the U.S. in all the different states. If you want to talk more about it, I'm here for the 2 days, but absolutely take advantage of what is sitting here in front of us.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the panelists, audience? Brian?
Dave, I captured a few things that I want to talk about over the next couple of days. They weren't all germane exactly to this topic, but in some of the future ones, Tom and Kathy and others have talked about the importance of networking, and we want to encourage that as much as possible. That won't get everybody in the state, though. So how do we develop processes that work for those who don't pay attention to anything until the time actually happens in which to implement? So how can we go beyond the networking and develop processes for those who are new to just in time? How can we develop those just in time awareness and training materials for those businesses who do no preparation ahead of time? I'd spend a little more time talking about the industry to industry support. I know HSN and UPS have a great relationship, and I know that Walgreens and Verizon have a great relationship. I want to consider how it is that we continue to push those and emphasize those so the businesses develop those. And then government recognizes what's necessary beyond those relationships. What are the critical infrastructure over which none of our private sector partners have any power to change anything. The utilities, the road infrastructure, the regulatory environment, what are the things that we need to focus on as government to empower them to make sure that their industry-to-industry relationships are effective in that. We'll be talking this afternoon about reentry processes and credentialing. That will come right before your opportunity to go have a drink, and that's on purpose because that session will drive you to drink. But, how is it that we manage in government? We will tend to, kind of veer towards having a nanny state because we don't want anybody to get hurt, but that's going to hurt us economically. So how do we help meet that delicate balance there when it comes down to it and in dealing with our law enforcement partners on those kinds of things? I want to consider things from a systems perspective in the state. What are the large industries we have, the agricultural industry, the tourism industry, and how do those things interplay, and how do we make sure that the cruise line and the hotel line and the roads and the restaurants that support that, all of those are coming up at the right time so that we don't have 5 out of 6 things working, but the 6th thing is keeping us from being fully operational. I'd like to spend more time as we go through the day. How does evolving technology help us in this effort? Chuck talked about the 2-a-day conference calls with businesses, and we don't have to do that anymore. We still do, but the future is not going to be come on at 4 o'clock and tell me what's open, what's closed. The future is we'll know immediately what's open and closed. Either you tell us or social media will tell us. How do we harvest that and tie that back into our mechanism and spend more time talking strategy as opposed to just a check off and on piece of it? And then finally, how do we help our elected officials recognize that this is a symbiotic relationship, that we are helping businesses get back up online, but businesses are helping us through tax revenue. And so this is not a one-way street. This is a symbiotic relationship that we need to really focus on to make sure, because what we do today is going to impact us in the next year or two, both on the private side and on the revenue generation stream for the locals and the states and the feds as well. So those are, again, way too much stuff to cover in one session, but over the course of the next 2 days, I think we'll hit on all those.
All right, I think this has been a great session to start the summit off on. I think it's time that we all stand up, relax a little bit. I believe there is coffee and refreshments out in the entryway here. Next session is at 11 o'clock right here, and that would be telling the story of private sector partnerships. So I think we've got a lot to look forward to the next couple of days. Thanks very much.